Good morning, everyone. I'm sitting in my sun porch thinking through a pretty deep topic that Dr. Eric and Jillian brought to us this past week about single consciousness. Now, the question that I'm asking myself is the I am the portal to consciousness? Jillian brought this up. Is the I am the portal? In other words, the doorway. Is it the opening up into consciousness? Now, when I think of I am, my mind goes to God. And I think of those words, I am that I am. And as I say those words, I stop afterwards when I say I am, because that I am is an awareness of that consciousness. Now, single consciousness, I've understood the concept for so many years, calling it oneness, through so many different spiritual masters, everyday people talking about the topic, very spiritual gurus that became very important to me in my life, and listening within. But in the end, I needed to decide for myself and take all that I'd learned from all these different people and put them into a working framework that could work for my own life. So I had a knowingness of the oneness, a knowingness that I had opened that pathway to consciousness. But in the end, I believe we can't just know it and think it and say the words. We have to be it before it's going to have any meaning in our life. And when I look back on my life and think, now, how is it that happened over time for myself? So that perhaps it could help you see where you are in this process of being human and trying to use a finite mind to bring yourself to more of what the infinite mind of divine love is within us. Well, I think of myself 30 years ago, and I'm thinking, okay, 30 years ago, I did not even notice that I was not being divine love. I was living, I was having a good life, everything was going well, but I really hadn't noticed whether I was being divine love or not. Now, take away 10 years of beliefs and happenings and experiences in my life, and 20 years ago, I was noticing. There's nothing like your own children to wake you up to noticing when you are not in that divine love place. And I have many, many experiences that I could explain with my children from the time they were little to the time they were teenagers and we roll their eyes at me, and their adult life. They are our greatest teachers. And so I began to really notice. But then I noticed I needed to also take away some of the things about myself that were not helping me grow into that being of love. Then about 5 years ago, I began being love because I had a wake-up call. Sickness moved into my life, and without judgment or criticism of myself, I had grown so used to criticizing myself and not giving myself self-love. And I had to wake up myself to the fact that I needed to lose the judgment. I needed to lose that criticism of myself that I just wasn't enough. And yet, I was enough, just as I needed to be any step of the way. And then really began moving love into my life once I realized what I'd left out. But then reconnective healing came into my life. And it was almost like a test for me. In other words, can I be the facilitator of a reconnective healing session and be only love? Can I pull out judgment? Can I take away any criticism? I'll never forget one of my first healings where I met a lady who's just become a really special friend in my life now, who came up and talked to me after a speaking engagement that I had with my sister, where we were sharing my near-death experience and her light experience. But I had begun to talk about reconnective healing. Her name is Kip. And she began to go on and on about her story of having a stroke 20 years ago and how she was struggling so much to be able to even tell me her story. She couldn't still get words out correctly, and she could barely walk. And it would be later that that little piece of criticism came in, and I thought, what in the world happened to this lady? And then realizing when I was talking to her that she was my age, and she looked like she was twice my age. And I thought, what happened in this person's life? Because I only heard snippets of it that day. But she was a wake-up call for myself to let another layer, the allowing, the observer of my life, and pulling that out of my reconnective healing practice. Because as I did a healing session for her, I sat and watched her tears just flowing from her eyes. And when she was done, I was the one that received a gift of unbelievable love from her. As tears were streaming down her eyes, and she was telling me she had seen her mom and her dad, and that, listen to me, I can get words out now. It was due to a stroke. She was a psychologist. And I realized I had put some of my judgment into her when I initially met her. Now, I've got a little more stories about her I'd love to share someday, but I want you to notice something, and that is, look how little I am now. Here's that me a long time ago. Wow, the letting go is what brought in being love. You know, it's our moment of choice now. Choose love. But it has to start with me. And I have to notice. And I have to let go. And I have to allow and observe. And then, being love is just a beautiful thing. And that's the single consciousness that I feel like I can put more in my life. I'm still a work in progress. I'm still working on it. And I always will be, I'm sure. But we all are, any stage of our life. So I hope you recognize you are enough wherever you are in your stage of life. Thank you for being with me today. And I'm loving to hear from you as you comment on our videos and our talks. And I appreciate all the comments that you make that help me grow as well.